So anything that anybody wants to question or comment or yes?
Is that what you first spoke about? Was what is the sort of clue? The clue that this is happening, that there's a reaction. And you mentioned dukkha.
Yes.
And the affective feeling of pain or
yes.
various levels. That my experience is more that the clue is propuncture and
Okay.
like I'm locked in mentally
Okay.
to some thought pattern.
Yeah.
Like I'm not immediately in contact with the affect.
Right.
But I can spot the propuncture.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
unless the affect is very strong, sort of
Yeah.
overwhelming, but usually
Yeah.
that's second.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the propuncture itself is actually painful, isn't it?
Yes.
But you experience, what you're saying is that what you notice is the tumbling thoughts rather than the pain in them. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So it's a sort of clue in.
Yeah.
There's something not, I've got to investigate this more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, perhaps that's a useful discussion. What are the clues for different people? Well, maybe I've just explained what it is for me. Yes, I just find reaction painful. Yeah. Yes, but yes, everybody will have that I think is an important starting point. Yeah. Where is the clue? Any other? Yes.
What happens when you are convinced that it is the other person? Does that mean that you're just not quite ready to drop down? Because sometimes I have a stage where it's like I know something's happening, but there's still a part of me that just thinks, no, this is definitely them.
Yeah.
Maybe I've got a bit to play in it, but
yeah.
I'm still hooked into that story
Yeah.
of it being something that
yeah.
they're doing.
Well, it may be. It may be completely them. Do you know, if somebody comes up to you in the street and just shouts at you gratuitously, you can't say that it's, as it were, your fault. But nonetheless, the issue is your reaction. Even if it is 90% them, you are reacting. Yeah? So that even if somebody does something very unpleasant to you, yes, you have to deal with that, and that's important. We're not arguing for quietism, you just let yourself be walked over. But at the same time, what is your response? You know, kind of ideally, it should be a metaphor, creative resolution. But what it probably is slipping into thinking they're to blame. That already is a kind of reaction. Yeah? They may actually be to blame, but that's not the point, is it? It's not a neutral judgment. Does that make sense? Not quite.
Yeah, it does. I understand that. It's just when I get caught up in that.
Well, then I suppose you'd have to notice that's again your triggers, aren't they? You'd have to notice that's what happens with you, that you tend to go into apportioning blame rather than understanding. Blame is automatically a reaction. Do you know what I mean? In an absolutely ideal world, you'd see X is doing that. They really are acting unskillfully. You can see that comes because they think that is the best way to fulfill themselves and make themselves happy. They just don't understand how best to do it. Do you know what I mean? You'd have a way of understanding what was happening that would be empathic. But what we do is we apportion blame. And blame is different from, it's not a neutral judgment. Yeah? Do you see what I mean? People do things that are painful and unpleasant and, as it were, blameworthy. But yeah.
I think, maybe that's a clue that I'm still holding.
Yeah.
I've got into the blame story.
Yeah.
Dropping.
Yeah. Yes.
When you say dropping in, that's also like acknowledging your pain, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like when you're in blame,
yes.
you're in a
very
particular view.
Yeah.
And that's actually protecting you from actually feeling what you're feeling. The upset, the distress, the frustration.
Yeah. I think blame. I'm a great blamer, and I've got quite a good analytic mind, so I can usually justify my blame. But I kind of try to train myself to recognize that all blame is hiding something. Why do I blame? Yeah.
Say you're in a situation you're aware that you're reacting, you're in a conflict with someone. Would you advocate or suggest actually doing the reaction practice?
Well, it depends, because that may just infuriate them further. So simple prudence is advised here. But obviously what you're trying to do eventually is not reaction practice, it's creativity practice, if you see what I mean. But you have to start with the reaction practice. But you're trying to get to the point where in the situation you can come up with a creative response, which may of course be just going. But yes, I think that it's worth spending some time on the reaction side of it. And what people have been doing in these reaction practice groups is going over what happened to sort of try to become more aware of it, because famously Asanga says this, that to begin with you act badly and then you realize you've acted badly, then you act badly realizing you're acting badly, and then you realize you're going to act badly and you don't. So you're bringing awareness to it and sort of, how could I have more quickly stopped blaming, stopped propungizing, got back into the sense of my own pain, my own hurt, and dropped down into what my needs were in the situation, and then being able to respond to them. But that's a process, and often we just react privately. Yeah. With a wonderful analysis and a complete account of how blameworthy they are and so forth. I speak from personal experience.
Is it just a given that we'll know what to do once the energy comes up? Because I imagine sort of the more we do it successfully, hopefully, the more energy will come up, the more we'll have to do with it.
Yeah. Well, it could be pretty chaotic. Look out. There could be quite a lot of energy about, which will not always be comfortable or conformable, but that's partly why you work in a team, so that you can begin to accommodate those energies that at the moment are not included, and together between you sort of accommodate them. Do you see what I mean? They're not. I think one mustn't think I can only experience and even express this energy when I can do it skillfully, because I think that just squashes them down. And of course, to some extent, that depends upon there needs to be a kind of agreement in a collective situation and an understanding of what everybody's going through. But I think it's one of the dangers of misunderstandings of spiritual life, that people think they've got to be immediately good, as it were. I think I told the story, I can't remember which group it was, of an early retreat where Bhante said he got really fed up. Just everybody was so mindful and quiet and sensible and serious, and he said really dull. And one day there was a work period, so he did what he used to do. It's at Aryatara, walked around and just sort of watched people, observing people. It's rather disturbing in itself. Then he went round the back of the house where two guys were supposed to be putting in raspberry canes. And when he got round the corner, they'd got the raspberry canes out and they were whacking each other with the raspberry canes. And he thought, phew, at last, some energy. So it's not necessarily going to be nicey-nicey. You're not necessarily going to straight away, be singing Monteverdi's Vespers. There may be sort of something a bit more kind of earthy that comes first. Do you see what I mean? Does that help? Yeah. I don't think that this has got to be a neat and tidy process. Bhante's talking about demons. not about, I don't know, sort of cocktail party. He's talking about forces, demonic forces, which initially are destructive. But somehow you have to, by a sort of judicious balancing act, catch the positive element in them.
And of course, some of the reactions that why it can be unwieldy is because some of them have very deep roots and actually have strong views behind them that come from wherever. And in a way, that's where the more energy there is, the more the reaction is probably the more likely there is that something quite deeply entrenched that does needs to come out. So it's an opportunity, isn't it? But it's uncomfortable and needs to get off it often.
Yeah. Well, a better honest collision than dishonest collusion. There's a collusion that we're all going to be nice. Oh dear, what am I generating? Yeah. But I think one shouldn't be afraid of expressing things in a bit of a way that's not yet quite smooth and integrated, because otherwise how are you going to do it? If it's suppressed, how are you going to do it?
But say with anger, you could work with that privately, couldn't you? So if you feel anger coming up, I sometimes do that in meditation where I can really sit with anger. It's not very often, but when it happens, it makes your meditation really come alive because you're really with this. And that's a way of tapping into the energy that lies underneath it.
Yeah. I think that
my concern would be if that would then be unskillful because you're going with something that is negative.
Yeah. Yes.
I think it sort of frees something up, and then you can take a step back and look at what's actually happening.
Well, the great danger, of course, when we're talking about energy, is that we rationalize it. I'm sure you're not meaning this, but that's the great danger, that the stepping aside means a stepping aside from the energy. So somehow you've got to learn to, as it were, ride with the energy. And that is, I don't think can be simply internal.
You're saying it helps you to have that space in meditation to just really contact it and allow it into consciousness and feel it, and it sort of wakes something up.
Yeah.
And you kind of, the question is, should I always just do it there? Because otherwise, if I kind of try and do it in connection with others, or it might be unskillful. What's the concern?
Well, so no, my suggestion is that by sitting with it yourself and allowing it to be, you can take the sting out of it a little bit, and then and then the next phase is to look at what the anger is about, say, and then it sort of helps me to understand why I'm reacting to something or someone in that way.
Yes, I'm still a little cautious. I agree with you. I think it's important to spend time introspecting, which you can do in the context of meditation. But I don't think it's always that there's something that has to be resolved, as it were. I think sometimes there's just energy, and that energy is not it hasn't yet found a satisfactory outlet. And I think it's particularly with aggression. And I speak very personally. Certainly as a young man, and I'm sure it affects women in the same sort of way, or different ways maybe, but a lot of energy. And it was quite sort of rough and raw. Actually, I found karate extremely helpful, that it gave a sort of way of allowing that energy up into my body, and second down black belt, and expressing it, so that it became part of me. Believe it or not, I used to be a very timid little chap. But it's not just the resolution of previous trauma or something like that. That, of course, is there. But I think there are other issues as well, and I think sometimes the trauma lens is overused today. I think a lot of things are just more to do with, I don't know whether I'm talking what you're saying, but a lot of things are just to do with human energies and letting them up into our bodies and in our lives. Yes. Nikki.
So is the aim or goal to transform the reaction, or not particularly?
Well, it's to connect with the fundamental energy and incorporate it into your spiritual life. So it becomes a part of that spiritual life rather than as an enemy to it. So that the analogy is of Guru Padmasambhava converting the demons that were destroying Samye and getting him, binding them so that they served and helped to build Samye. That's the metaphor. So that there are energies that are not resolved, that express themselves in reaction, often because of either bad condition, unpleasant, painful experiences in conditioning, or because of cultural conditioning. If you've got a Catholic conditioning, you read Abaya's book, the effect that Catholic, the one that he had anyway, a Catholic conditioning had on him in guilt and so forth, which suppressed his natural energies. So there may be many reasons why the reaction takes place, because the way in which your energies are failed to be integrated. There are many different reasons for that, but what you're fundamentally trying to do is to get in contact with the energies and incorporate them into spiritual life. Does that make sense?
Back to something I was today, because I recently had an experience where, in meditation, on retreat, I noticed a reaction to the person next to me.
Right.
And I thought, oh, this is an opportunity.
Yes.
To
great.
A safe place for me to sit with this anger.
Yeah.
And it just came up as a complete rage.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
I won't tell you what I was thinking about this baby. And then it just subsided. I just let it come through.
Yes, yeah.
And then just kind of felt the energy.
Yeah, great.
Energy in the body.
Yeah.
And after the meditation, I saw this woman, and it had just completely gone. I realised it was, I kind of owned it.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
And it was, I could see it was absolutely nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
So is that the kind of...
Yes. That would be a very clear example of what I'm talking about. Yeah.
But as you said also, there's so many different types of reactions. So in a way, there could be quite different reactions are two examples.
Yeah.
So I mean, we do have all these energies within us, and they will just kind of emerge, when the conditions are there. Somebody sitting next to you that's just irritated you, suddenly, you're feeling it. But there's also those types of reactions that are very specific to do with particular aspects of our conditioning that get activated when a certain specific event arises. And then for that one, we do need to reflect and okay, what happened there? And what are the processes that led to that? So we can understand the conditions that give rise to it.
I think there was an element for me
as well in that.
I think I would say there's probably a little less of that than people think, because we're educated these days to think in terms of traumatic experience determining our reactions, and I think that probably somewhat overdone.
Yeah, not so it's trauma. It's just literally deep habits that we have. We have deep habits.
Yes, I think so. Sometimes that you can sort of bypass that. Of course, there's bypassing in an unhealthy sense. That's a technical term these days. But I think there's sometimes you can just contact the energy.
Sometimes,
Yeah. Caro.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask how it might work in practice. So, if you're in a meeting and things have to be sort of decisions have to be made, and say if I had a strong reaction, would I then, in the moment, say, oh, I'm having a strong reaction,
or is it a process where you reflect after the meeting, or do you just make that call?
Well, it depends so much on circumstance, doesn't it, and on the nature of the meeting. You could have a meeting where it was an open possibility that things could be explored. But there's nothing more irritating than going into a meeting where something's got to be decided and everybody's talking about their innards. The whole meeting is a kind of giant reporting in. I'm afraid I've done that. And, there is an objective need, and it's partly the objective need that generates the material, if you see what I mean. So you do your best in the situation. You may do it badly, you may be scratchy or irritable or reactive or whatever. then you reflect upon it and you talk with, if it was a person or a group of people, you talk with them. So I think one needs to be part of the high value of the working situation is there is something objective to be done. And I was going to say more about this last night. I think part of the problem of rootlessness in a social sense is that we've overemphasized the self. Actually, the self does not exist. The self only exists in interaction. I have an aphorism that I'm rather proud of, that I only exist at the intersection of all my relationships. And so that what we tend to be the kind of zeitgeist is I am important as a separate subject, and my needs are paramount. And stop, I've got a problem. Forget about the world ending, I've got a problem. And I think that the value of a working situation like this is we try to balance both. We try to have an objective project that we're trying to carry out, which we've got objective criteria for. Are people coming? Are they learning the Dhamma? Are they coming through? Are they growing? Etc. So we've got something quite objective to do together, but at the same time, we're working on ourselves and we're in communal interaction with each other. So we've got to fulfill both sides of it. Yes, I think you may sometimes just have to park your reaction, do your best to hold it aside, and then afterwards think and talk about it. But I think this is what Bhante, there's a famous Windhorse trading seminar, which I think is well worth looking at, where Bhante talks about work and spiritual practice. One of the main points he makes is that work objectifies your experience if you're working with others, whereas our tendency of the modern culture is to subjectify everything and to privilege subjective experience over objective. I remember an occasion when we were doing a reporting in the mural room, the whole order, you'd sit round in the mural room and report in. And some people had been running a restaurant at the Festival of Body, Mind and Spirit. Does that still go? Yeah? They run a restaurant there. And so he was reporting in and saying, we did the restaurant. It was a complete disaster financially, but it was a great experience. And Bhante said, no, you failed. You failed. You didn't do what you set out to do, and you're just rationalizing it. I mean, he laid in there and then, which he didn't often do. And, because, it's as if, the objective situation is just sort of there for my benefit, rather than to make money to run the centre. So he was big on that, and this is why he talked of work as a tantric guru, because it confronts you with an objective situation which calls up the Tarpa Nagpo in you, the little demon or the big demon in you, and asks for that to be transformed. So thank you for the point, because it's an important one. Yeah. There may be times when you do just have to say, look, I'm having such a strong reaction here, I can't go on. Either carry on without me, or can we spend some time talking about this? But I would say those were pretty rare. And if that was happening every week, I'd be worried. Nothing would happen. I think that sometimes somebody is the canary in the mine shaft. You know what I mean? Somebody finds what's going on difficult. I've experienced that actually a little bit with talking with some of you this week, that some people are having difficulties which they think of as my difficulty, but I think, no, I think you're onto something there. Yeah, you know, your way of being onto it is not very healthy, or is not quite right, but I think it's not just to do with you, it's something to do with the situation. Something is not there. Like I think possibly there needs to be more space for young guys to be young guys, if you see what I mean, not just sitting in front of a screen. So I think that sometimes that you may experience something reactively, you know, exactly what Surya Gupta says. You need to try and sort out, well, what's my reaction and what is perhaps a reflection of something that is more objective. Yeah, oh yeah.
It's a fascinating discussion. I was just interested in this. You're sort of alluding to how our natural energies, maybe through our cultural conditioning, but maybe even through Buddhist practice,
yes,
can be somehow subtly suppressed.
Yes.
Maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's necessary for a time, or maybe...
Yeah. Well, I think for a start, you know, we do have a largely middle-class movement in Britain, and that presupposes certain sort of modes of communication, and often people from a working class background actually find that difficult. And because if you come from a working class background, you think the middle classes have got it right, as it were, or not. But you know what I mean? And you try to mould yourself to that. So that's one sort of thing that plays out amongst us. And often I think we need to break out of that and have a less prissy sort of mood and atmosphere. You know, it's not all about you know, high refined classical music or very you know, refined. You know, well, the big joke in the old days was, Bante would joke about this a lot at Croydon. It was the Bloomsbury set. It was real decadence, if you see what I mean. But you know what I mean? There's so there are sort of cultural influences upon us, which to some extent are to do with the dominant culture in our movement, which comes from the dominant culture around us. And so there's something of that. Then I think there's a whole history of Buddhism in the West, which started in the head. And you know, Bante was the first really strong protest against that, and much derided for it. So like one of the things about his sex life is, of course, people think that sex is not part of a spiritual life, if you see what I mean. And that's one thing that people are so indignant about, as well as, you know, the way he conducted it. But and even that I wonder sometimes. So yes, I think we do have attitudes that are to some extent group or collective. Not everybody participates them in the same ways, which are to some extent to do with the dominant culture around us and the dominant presuppositions. And you were talking about the People of Colour retreat and the mood in the puja there, which is just completely different. So culture does affect things. And I think there are yes, and we do not have a Buddhist world yet. You know, in a Buddhist world, is what Bante talks about in the Reflections on the Gādhava Sutta. Very, very interesting right at the end, that we need to build a Buddhist world in which you can be fully a Buddhist. And that's not just about being able to say, I'm a Buddhist. It's about being able to act like a Buddhist, which might be something that people didn't think was proper, if you see what I mean. So, yes, I do think we're a lot better than many, and certainly a lot better than we were, but I think still our idea of what a good Buddhist is not quite there. Bante used to talk quite a bit about paganism, you know, the need for a paganism, which simply means unrepressed natural energies. and in contact with the larger energies around us. So we've got a long way to go. And there is something about our culture that needs constantly reflecting upon. I think we shouldn't over-refine. Prematurely, yes, yes, sorry, that's what I mean, yeah. Over-refine rather than genuinely refine. Yeah. I think it's a fascinating question, yeah. Go on.
One of the things I liked about being at your place was the balance of like the physical and
yes.
the body.
Me too. Yes.
And recently I've been experimenting with like going for a run before
Yeah.
meditating. Sometimes I do yoga before meditating. And that just changes everything.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm also less reactive.
Yes. Yeah.
Does that, I don't know what my question is exactly, but something along the lines of, does that count? Is that transforming, or is that just moving energy through? Is it better, how does that fit with
right.
other practices?
Well, it comes under the heading of indirect methods, doesn't it? Again, Bhante always used to say, do not take my example. I'm a particularly poor physical specimen. He didn't actually say that, but he was. A gentle walk was his exercise. He did one stage start to do Tai Chi, but he said, don't take my example in that respect, as in others too. And he strongly encouraged us to take up exercise. I was saying to the guys that the first Tuscany retreat, the first ordination retreat, 3-month ordination retreat that Bhante set up and ran, we had Dharmavira there, who was a 3rd Dan black belt at that stage, and we had every day a karate session, which, half of us would join in. And Bhante was delighted, absolutely delighted. I remember him standing there one day watching us, and afterwards he said, that's the energy you need to break through. So, yes, I think that a lot of the difficulties that people have, emotional difficulties that they have, just not exercised enough, not fit enough, not eating properly. There are therapies that are to do with just getting better exercise. I think it's good if it's something that is a little progressive, as it were. That's why I think that yoga or particularly karate, because we have a 2nd Dan black belt here. I think that something where you start at a certain level and that you by skill you refine what you're doing, but without losing the fundamental energy. I think that's good. A run is great. I used to do a lot of running. But I did find that doing karate and then more recently Qigong, I'm working with the energies and I'm in contact with my body and I'm exercising, but I'm also, there's a mental effect. And what you often find, well, you find it with running actually. I used to sometimes, after I'd had a shower and cooled down, I'd go and meditate and hardly had to try. Yeah? And there's the order member I work most closely with in India, Sadhana Ratna. He's a 6th Dan black belt. And every day he does 3 hours karate practice. And he says at the end of it, he just sits down to meditate. And he's a very deep meditator. So if the body is activated and the energies of the body are alive, then your meditation is going to have all that energy in it, and your interaction with others is going to be much more real, much more earthed, or earth, water, fire, aired, if you see what I mean. Yeah, I think it's I think it's great we have yoga here. I think the form of yoga that we do here is great, but I would like to see something more sort of vigorous, particularly for guys, but also for women too. Some women like that too. Something that's a bit more kind of aggressive. There's sort of another element that Bhante used to talk about. He used to talk about positive competition, and he would refer to the ancient Greeks in their idea of both theatre and poetry and athletics. The principal that they tried to work with was what was called agoni, which of course has now come to mean agony, pain, extreme pain. But it simply meant pitting yourself against another, not to beat them, but to beat yourself, if you see what I mean, so that you stretch yourself by testing yourself against others. And it's so much against the mood of the times, and one can understand why, because this negative competition is win at any cost. If it means putting a spike in their gun, no, I can't think of the right analogy. It doesn't matter. The main thing is that you win. But that's not the principle of agoni. That principle is that somebody does something and you want to do better, but not at the expense of cheating or anything like that. And your main issue is that you have stretched yourself. And so what Bhante was saying was that we have those energies in us. We need to put them in a good direction. We can't just suppress them and be uncompetitive. I think that's dangerous, because then you get competitions about who's most uncompetitive. Literally, I mean, it just turns sour and distorted. But in a thoroughly metaphorful and aware way, you can use somebody else's abilities to strengthen your own. So that's the sort of thing we're talking about, using instincts that when they are unregenerate and not put in a moral and spiritual context can be extraordinarily destructive. You can, in a spiritual context, you can harness them for your own development. But just to return to your point, I do think physical exercise is very, very important, especially for city dwellers, because one of the things that you lack is connection with nature. So you need at least to be in contact with nature in your own body. And I think that's kind of vital. For some it may be very vigorous and even aggressive. For some it may be more kind of gentle and subtle. It depends on the individual. I think it's a real problem with technology, because it is alienating. And so you've got to make a counterbalancing effort. Sort of look like something is bubbling up in Sajjadasa, no? The desire to move about. Okay, let's conclude there. And thank you all very, very much.